Another Monday evening, another Texans collective headed your way. Appreciate you for joining us. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And don't forget to visit our friends at Prize Picks and SeatGeek. We'll tell you more about them as the show rolls on. In the Loops, Reggie Atatula, the locker rooms, Landry Locker, Houston Footballs, Cody Stutes, that's me. We're here with you for the next hour to talk all about the Houston Texans offense. Training camp is drawing nearer and nearer. A conversation about the offense is on deck for us tonight. We start with the embattled offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, who finally has all of his buddies and system clarity up and down the coaching staff on the offensive side, and the quarterback who enters a make or break year. Where do we believe the Caley and Stroud relationship sits as we are on the start of the 2026 football season for the Houston Texans?
Well, I mean, I think both these guys have a lot of pressure. With CJ Stroud, we broke this down many ways. Nick Caley as well. I think that they could both potentially be heading into the final year of their tenure. I thought the conversation that Nick Caley had with Jonathan Alexander, I thought was interesting. I mean, it felt like fake accountability. I didn't really understand what he was owning up to. I didn't think it was completely necessary. I don't think this is like a perfect mix when it comes to the system. CJ Stroud, I don't think this is CJ Stroud's system. I don't know if the previous one really was either, but make no mistake about it, the dynamic is going to be important. I just really don't know if it's like something that's like being overreacted to based on what we saw at the end of the season, because I think it was good enough to win games, and now all of a sudden we're like talking about it's just a weird mix, to be honest with you, heading into the season. But I do have question marks about how this ends, much like I did with the Bobby Slowick CJ Stroud duo towards the end.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, the dynamic itself is only as notable as the results that it produces. We're kind of in that kind of end game here. I mean, if it is true, all the things that we've heard time and time again through the spring, that, oh man, they seem to be on a really great roll. Like, sure, I think that probably gives you the foundation to hopefully be better than you were this past year. But ultimately, I don't know if that was the reason that was holding it back, a seeming, I guess, rift between CJ and Nick Caley. I do think that the two games that we are largely hinging a lot of our questions of CJ Stroud did feel like he went rogue. So I do think that is worth noting, right? It felt like, and when I say went rogue, maybe that's a little strong, but he definitely felt like he went into business for himself in some of these instances, as opposed to making the decision that felt like it was the smartest or the best for the situation, which maybe you could interpret that as like a lack of belief in what, the play caller was setting up for him. But Nick Caley, I keep coming back to the fact that when he was asked about this, he was like, nah, we're great like we always have been, which would kind of intimate from his perspective that there has not been a shift. And so I don't know what to make of it if I'm to believe him from that, because where I think I am constantly looking for the place where I go, that is the change that will ultimately create better results. And from Caley's perspective, there is no change here. We've been working well and great, which makes me go, actually, I would kind of like if there was a change there, because maybe I could point to that as a reason why this is going to work better.
CJ Stroud just doesn't feel like he's ever been totally and fully bought in on the way that they operate this offense. There was the conversation point early on in the season where when he talked about how is death by 1,000 paper cuts, it didn't really feel like he talked about it in like a positive manner. There was a conversation during the season about, hey, let's do some of the things that we do well, or that we like to do. And then even as recently as this offseason, when he was asked about Nick Caley's offense, he's talking about, yeah, it's a blend of what he wants to do and what we want to do, what we think we're really good at. And so Stroud may not be fully bought in on this offense. He may not be the right quarterback for this offense. And Nick Caley explaining the square peg, round hole excuse that he had to Jonathan Alexander for the slow start last year. Well, we now know the quarterback had some shoulder issues last offseason that kept him from getting caught up. Stroud had some other built-in excuses that he went to. There really aren't as many or any excuses for this one. Like, it should be better. It should look good. Stroud's had some exposure to this. Caley's had some exposure to how Stroud wants to operate. They've got to find the right medium, the right mix between what works for both of them. And it's weird to watch an offense and to basically have it in the category of, hey, just don't screw this up. for the defense? Because I feel like Sean McVay convened to start 2026 and was like, let's be the best offense we could be. Like, I feel like that's what most offensive coordinators would operate with. And it feels like the Texans are very much in the category of let's be enough and let's not get in the way of the defense. And that may be the way that they have to win football games with the way that this offense operates and the level of talent that they have up and down the offensive side of the roster.
Yeah, and I'm this may be it's not a completely uneducated guess, but I would bet that if you were to ask guys who've left here, and we'll just say Bobby Slowick and maybe Gerard Johnson in like this hypothetical discussion, if you were to ask them off record, whatever, I don't think Gerard drinks, but maybe Bobby does. Like if you're just drinking a beer around a table and you ask them about CJ Stroud, I don't think they would say he's the easiest guy to coach. And I'm not sitting here saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just telling you, I don't think that they would say that he's an easy guy to coach. There's some really great, all-time great players that maybe weren't easy to coach. There were some that maybe their first few years, they weren't easy to coach, and that kind of changed. I think you can point to a number of all-time greats that kind of grew into that. But I say that to say, I think from Nick Caley's perspective, regardless of whether CJ Stroud is a system fit or not, it feels like to a certain point, his entire existence past this season, it rests on at least making it look okay with CJ Stroud or making it look good. And I don't think that's necessarily an easy task with where things are right now. And I think you can kind of read between the lines of some of the stuff that CJ Stroud says, like in season with Bobby Slowick. We need to find ways to have fun. We need to have difficult conversations. Nick Caley's finally gonna listen to what we want to do, like more or less what he said. So I do think from Caley's perspective, I don't think CJ Stroud is probably the easiest guy to coach. And I would bet a lot of money that the guys who have left here would probably echo that sentiment. So it is a difficult dynamic, but they both got to make it work. And for the sake of Nick Caley, he probably needs to at least make it look clear that if there is a problem, he's not the problem, because CJ Stroud's going to play football next year and be a starting quarterback, whether it's with the Texans or not. If this doesn't work for Nick Caley, who knows when he's an OC again.
And this is where I like to quote one of my favorite shows, which is Mad Men. That's what the money is for. You know, like that's kind of how this thing is situated. As you mentioned, rightfully so, Landry, not every great quarterback was a walk in the park to deal with, right? Like that is what your job is as an offensive coordinator. So often we talk about this in the context of obviously the schematics and that portion of it. People management is part of being a coach. It's part of being a manager, right? That is a large reason why we all know somebody who's a manager who we think stinks at their job, right? Because they don't know how to manage the people of this. And so, yeah, man, that's going to be a part of this. It does not have to be particularly easy, although I will give CJ Stroud this out, and you can call me an apologist if you want to. Point to me the season that he has had a vaguely, I guess helpful or useful, foundation for him to apply his trade upon, right? Like this Texans team has not done a great job of giving him a situation to particularly flourish in, and that's including the rookie year in which he won Rookie of the Year. And so, no, I mean, like the bar is simultaneously high, but not high for Nick Caley, right? Like they just have a decent offense, and you should be able to get what we know is in there out of CJ Stroud. And it's going to require you to make sure that you like appease him somewhat, but that would not be a new thing under the sun by any means in the National Football League.
See, I would push back and say that year one, I didn't hear too many complaints about it. As a matter of fact, like after the season, CJ Stroud was, he was the toast of the league. And then last year, I think the surroundings were fine. I think he's the reason that they came up short. I think it was set up nicely for him. I think having the number one defense or a top defense in the league, I think it's an asset. I think a lot of times we talk about the O-line and we talk about the receivers, but you mentioned him playing rogue. It was set up for him to get to that big moment. So I get what you're saying. Like it hasn't been awesome and there are a lot of questions, but I don't think he's I don't think this is like he's been doomed. And the reality is I think you can make a case that we've seen what it looks like when a quarterback is able to elevate. We saw it with CJ Stroud in 2023, and it felt like Deshaun Watson did it in 2020, maybe even 2019. So I don't know that he's like just a big victim of like malpractice, Reg.
Yeah, I'm not going to try and paint it as though like he has been absolutely screwed by the circumstance, but we're not going to pretend like even year one, an offense in which I think the framing is necessary. You're coming off of a couple years of MALO bad. You guys know this very well. It was awful. And so relatively, you go, oh man, this is incredible, right? But we've all been in a place where you're really hungry and then you get a stale piece of bread and that does a little something for you. Like that was the stale piece of bread. You can't tell me that year one, without a particularly good running game, I mean, an offense that was not particularly efficient or effective. It was just kind of, hey, we got some big plays in certain circumstances, in large part because this quarterback does this. Like that's not the best circumstance by any means for a young quarterback. And that's what CJ Stroud still is to some degree, a young quarterback. Not to take away any responsibility he has for like getting along to, get this thing further. I think that is very well established. But I think ultimately, right, the point being, there has not been a particular offense in this, even what we're talking about last year, right? Did not have a great run game. And it was basically described as sufficient in the way that we're talking about. That is not what you surround a potentially great quarterback with. So, yeah, man, I think that I would understand some level of frustration. But ultimately, man, I think it would behoove Nick Caley to find some ways to appeal to him in order to get the best out of him for both of their sakes.
The tough part is we haven't seen nearly enough of elevator CJ Stroud past 2023. There have been moments and pieces of it, but for the most part, he's been an operator that has had some nice moments and then has had some really bad moments when he's been at the helm, the playoffs standing out as the biggest one. If he's not going to be the elevator, then he's got to fit into being just the operator. Do what the coach wants you to do what the offense asks you to do. And D'Amico Ryans and the rest of the organization smart enough to understand and see like, hey, Stroud's doing this. It's not working. Maybe you do a little bit more of what Stroud is comfortable at. But I also think there's an element of operating the exact way Nick Caley wants to operate, that if he could get that from Stroud and they saw some success, it'd be easier for him to consistently do it. They would just had so much success. They'd had so much few and far between successful moments that it's been tough probably to get CJ Stroud to buy into the way that he's operating. And it's been tough for Nick Caley to say, why do I have to listen to you when you haven't been 2023 version of you? Your accuracy hasn't been as good. Your decision-making hasn't been as good. Your reading of the defense hasn't been as good. Your improvisation hasn't been as good. None of it's been as consistent as it was in 2023. So there is that like kind of that give and take where it kind of goes back to where, Reggie says, hey, this is what you're here for. Figure it out, both of you. And that's where they kind of have to land. And if they don't figure it out, it probably costs both of them their jobs. There's a very unlikely scenario where one out survives the other, but it's pretty hard to see. And that guy would have to thread the needle and the other guy would have to be a disaster. And I just don't see either of those happening. They're either going to succeed together or they're both going to find new jobs together.
I would hate to hear Nick Caley say that out loud, right? Like, why do I have to listen to you? Because I imagine the response back would be like, and what have you done? Right? Like, what skins do you have on the wall? At least I got a rookie of the year out here, right? And so I think, and I ask this as a fairly genuine question, so please take it as such. How fair is it to ask him to be an elevator when you're also simultaneously saying, hey, stay within the bounds of what we're asking you to do here? Right? Like those things are somewhat opposite, at least in my mind. Am I wrong in that assessment?
Well, I think if he'd shown more, you would give him more leeway. Like if he'd done more 2023 stuff, you give him more leeway in 2026, but you didn't see that much in 2025. There was, conversations from him at the podium about, and if he's going to let on a little bit at the podium in front of the media, he's jabbering about it behind the scenes too. So I don't think he's fully bought into the system. I think he believes there's a element of, give and take that hasn't maybe been as present. And again, they've got to figure that out and they've got to find exactly what works for CJ Stroud to the point where he's not trying to do too much. And they got to find out what works for Nick Caley, where Stroud's doing exactly what he wants him to do.
I just wish we could I wish there was like a Hard Knocks footage type of thing where we could just go back and see how the conversation got to the point where this was the system that they ran with. Now, it was obvious that CJ Stroud wasn't pounding on the table to keep the old system. It felt like he was kind of over that a little bit. And it felt like he was just, by the time the season ended, it almost felt like he was just ready to get to the offseason and just be done with it. Like it was very a weird vibe from him. Something happened in 2024. Schedule was crazy, so maybe that was kind of an element. There was different way in which defenses were attacking him and all that. But that, throwing that aside, I just wish we could get like the conversation between D'Amico and Nick Caserio where they came to the conclusion that, you know what, let's try this New England offense. And some people will say, well, it's not the New England offense. It's New England offense. Like there's some other stuff that they mixed in there, but it's the New England offense pre-snap. It's the New England offense. A lot of times in the run game, they try to add some stuff, which is actually kind of weird too. Like if you're going to add stuff to the New England offense, but it is. We've asked multiple players, and it essentially is. And CJ Stroud's watching early 2000s New England Patriots tape for a reason. So like, I just wish we could see like what the dynamic was where they decided this, what it was like when they told CJ Stroud, what CJ Stroud's reaction was, because you got to think like, even if you put a nice face on, he had to have, as soon as, you know what it's like where you have a conversation with the boss or something like that, and you're sitting there like shaking your head. As soon as you get in the car, I just want to see that first cell phone call and what it sounded like, because he could not have really like thought that, like just completely said, I want to run this system. It's a weird, I want to see. It's obviously Nick Caserio who was pushing this. Like no one's ever going to convince me. Like it's the offense that he was a part of for 3 decades. And these are a bunch of his buddies who run the system and stuff. But I just wish we could see like how it all shaped up, just to kind of see what CJ's reaction was, what Caserio's, what D'Amico's, and all that.
I do wonder if there's an element of CJ Stroud that said whatever he needed to say to convince anybody that different was better than what they had. And I mean, if he pounded the table to keep Bobby Slowick, wouldn't have Slowick got another year? Like, couldn't the quarterback have assisted? Like, hey, I wasn't as good as I needed to be. CJ himself said at the end of 2024, he thought the NFL was going to be easy. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the messaging. It's like, yeah, I thought it was going to, after the rookie season, I thought it was going to be a little bit different. We had some success. It was going to be able to do that. And, if I just wonder if there's an element of they tried something completely different because the quarterback said enough to convince everybody that something completely different was what he wanted and could operate in. And then they give him, hey, here's what we did with Tom Brady. And then it's like, well, okay, well, actually nobody's Tom Brady. So, you probably can't coach him as hard as you coach Tom Brady. You can't ask him to do some of the same things that you asked Tom Brady to do. And you don't have, in addition to that, you don't have the other 10 guys around him as good as the guys that Brady had around him either. So,
and you don't also have the scaffolding that was used to get the Tom Brady offense up, right? Like that is a part of this that I feel like we are in the portion of the program where you have to use the scaffolding to get this offense up. We talked about it a number of times, how like difficult this offense is, whether it's on, whoever at the line has to ID, whether it's wide receivers who have to pick up the various different portions of the scheme in order to be able to do their job right. Like all of these things are required. How much more so for the quarterback, who then also comes into this is like, I'm not going to have a run game that's situated well enough to actually do this. I think that there's all of that that's still within the conversation, which again is not said to absolve CJ Stroud of like whatever he has hand he has to play in it. But it just feels like there's so much of this that feels like getting an IKEA set, but missing a few of the things that you're necessary to build it.
Yeah, look, CJ Stroud's not without fault. Nick Caley's not without fault. Caserio putting the roster together last year, not without fault. Like it's just how many percentage points do you want to put, in each person's category? I think a lot of people put it on Nick Caley. A lot of people put it on CJ Stroud, and then, a lot of people put it on the offensive line and things like that. Rightfully so. I understand where you can play the blame game. You can get a lot of people, and they made a couple of necessary changes that they felt like. I do find it interesting that the big conversation about the new quarterback coach is, communicating the right thing to CJ Stroud, as if was there a giant disconnect between the offensive coordinator and the quarterback because the quarterback coach couldn't explain the system? But there's no excuse for that now, because this is what Jerry Shaplinski has been in before, and he's been in the system before, and he's knowledgeable of it. And boy, Nick Caley and Jerry Shaplinski sure like each other.
Jeez, my goodness.
They might like each other better than just about any duo we've ever heard about.
Yeah. If they get divorced, the other one's the best man. I can promise you that. That's for damn sure.
They might
next wedding.
They might just do domestic partnership. They might just go.
Come on.
Route. Reggie, Go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say I just love like the stepdad aspect of this, where it was like clearly you could not get in good with the kid who is CJ Stroud until the actual dad was out of the building. That's what it feels like is happening here with the quarterback room. Because I mean, he was in there, right? He was the assistant quarterback coach, and ostensibly he was a part of all this. But all of a sudden, we're gonna pretend like all the messaging is entirely different. But because dad was here, clearly you would not give the stepdad enough of the chance. That is what we're setting up here as a circumstance.
That's the weird thing, is because it's kind of Cole Popovich like, where Cole Popovich was the assistant OL coach.
Yeah,
and he comes in, but the difference between Cole Popovich and John Carroll Jerry, like when you talk to him, you can tell like Cole Popovich is a hard ass who had an idea of what he wanted to change. Like, and you can kind of see in what they do and what they've done that he has a vision. I don't know what John Carroll Jerry is about after spending about 8-10 minutes with him, whatever. I just know he loves Nick Caley. That's it. But I have no idea what he's about. I have no idea what he does. I just know that whenever someone leaves New England and they want to run that New England system, it's a short shelf life. But whether it's Brian Flores, whether it's Josh McDaniels, whether it's Joe Judge, like all these guys just take him with them to be like quarterback coach or whatever. And then Nick Caley gave him like the very vague describing job with the Rams. So that's all I know. A lot of guys aren't able to kind of express their vision. Hopefully he's one of those guys, but in speaking with him, it was a very unimpressive display, to be completely honest with you.
Who is his Dante Scarnecchia? Like, that would make this go over a lot better. You know what I mean? You remember that time? You remember that couple of weeks where we just talked about Dante Scarnecchia?
Josh McDaniels. They all idolize Josh McDaniels. Anyone from within 500 miles of Ohio idolizes Josh McDaniels, or his dad.
Yeah.
It's
like, yeah, that's a great point, Reggie. Cole Popovich learned under was handpicked by one of the best offensive line coaches we can hear in recent memory. Multi-time head coach failure and only succeeded one time without Tom Brady. Josh McDaniels is the guy that everybody else is learning from. It's a great point. It's a sad point too. We will talk about the run game. We mentioned that a little bit here in just a moment, but speaking of running, there's a lot of running in soccer. Reggie, what do you got for us here as we get to Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the best way to play daily fantasy. You play your first $5, you get $50 in free lineups when you sign up with the code HMA. You're making more or less predictions on given stats. The United States is playing a big-time soccer match. Reggie, what do you have for us with our Prize Picks entry for tonight?
Let's get a couple of picks from that game, why don't we? That starts very soon after we finish this here fantastic podcast live. Give me, when it comes to shots taken in this game, I'm going with the man who was supposed to be banned, Folari Balogun. Give me over more than 1.5 shots here. I feel like that's a good way to go. Like, I don't know necessarily that they will get goals necessarily, but I do feel like he's going to get opportunities. It seems like Belgium's already coming out with a little bit of defense in this, and he's here to be a goal scorer. I think he's going to take his shots with his new lease on life. Also in this one, give me clearances. I know that sounds weird, but Chris Richards has been a fantastic defensive center back for this team. And I think that with Romelu Lukaku getting forward, I think that he's going to be called into action. Give me more than 6.5 clearances for the USA. And then I want to switch over to Egypt for their matchup because versus Argentina. Obviously, Messi's going to be in tow. He's going to look to continue pushing for the Golden Boot and continue pushing to win a back-to-back World Cup. And I'm going to go to the Egypt goalkeeper here. Goals allowed is what I'm looking for. And unfortunately for them, I don't think Egypt has – I think they've kept one clean sheet, if none at all. And I don't think that helps when you got Messi over there. And so give me Mustafa Shobair for the Egypt goalkeeper, actually. I think I think we're going to get 2 goals on him. He has not been particularly good, and I think that this one is going to be some easy money on top.
Okay, all right. So
I like it.
USA matchups, and take that Egypt from Messi and his Argentinian friends. 10 to win, 26 on that entry. Of course, you can get the flex play if you are not confident in Soccer Reggie. We're confident in Soccer Reggie.
Wow.
So we're doing the power play tonight. That's how easy it is to put the lineup in. You play your first 5, get $50 in free lineups. You sign up with the code HMA. There's a link in the description down below. Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to play daily fantasy. All right, gentlemen, the rushing attack for this Texans team, they were, let's see, how do I put this nicely? pathetic last year on the ground. It was embarrassing the way that they operated in short yardage situations. You can blame the offensive line. We'll talk about them a little bit later. You can blame the running backs. You can blame Nick Chubb not recovering from a horrific knee injury, or the fact that Nick Chubb was the running back in the first place, or the mysterious Joe Mixon mystery injury, which is the weirdest thing this organization's done in a very, very long time. But looking forward, David Montgomery added via trade, Woody Marks in the 2 spot, Jawar Jordan. Right now, I would say the third running back for this team. It's a pretty strong 1-2-3, the strongest 1-2-3 they've had in many years. I have hopes for this rushing attack. I'm not ready to plant my flag and say they're going to be a whole hell of a lot better, but it feels like they're at least trying to head in the right direction with the talent and the rushing attack that they have tried to put together here.
It's definitely the emphasis, and even the guys that they brought in on the offensive line, they lean more run than pass. Is there kind of a double-edged sword there where, I mean, you kind of give and take one for the other? I don't know, but you said it's a pretty impressive duo. For what they've had, yes, I would agree with that. It's been pretty bad if you look at the running back duos of the D'Amico Caserio era. They've had Joe Mixon, who's been by far the best, but after that, you had Dameon Pierce lingering around, Dameon Pierce getting beat out by Singletary, and then last year Nick Chubb probably shouldn't have been starting, so you can put him back there. I do think it's the most balanced run game they've had. I just go back to the term of the Nick Caley era, from the beginning to now, square peg round hole. And I'm not necessarily going to sit here and call my shot and say that they're going to run the ball effectively. But I do know that they're going to try. And my concern becomes, if they can't do it, do they know how to adjust, and do they know how to pivot? And that's really my biggest concern. There's obviously an emphasis. There's reason for optimism, but I'm concerned that when a team comes out and says they want to run the ball, sometimes even if they can't, they still try it. And I think that's where the Texans could find themselves in trouble when it comes to what they say they want to do.
When you talk about doing what CJ Stroud wants, if you're talking about pivoting out and running the football, that's all you're going to have to do, right? Like, it's just, that's all you're going to have. Because here's the thing. Everything they have built is situated off of being able to run the football, right? Like, the way that they have built this team right now says we run the football, and then run the football, and then we will figure out what else to do after running the football. Like, this is clearly the stated identity of what they're trying to do. And so, yeah, man, like that is particularly interesting. And to add on to that, right, the room that they have, not that Warren Sharp is the end all be all, but I thought it was very interesting that he put out a ranking of the tiers of the various different running backs, a ranking of the running back rooms rather around the league. The Texans come in at a robust 27th. Right. And one of the things that he made note of that I found fascinating was the fact that David Montgomery, when the boxes were loaded, averaged 3.9 yards per attempt, which was lower than the league average of 4.2, which absolutely caught me off guard, because that's one of those guys that you think about in those big box circumstances. Now, one of the mitigating factors to that particular statistic is that David Montgomery got way more goal line carries than any of the other people who did this a lot, which obviously limits the amount of yards that you could get. But it did come into my mind where I was like, what happens if the big body back that you're bringing in, didn't mean the alliteration, but there you go, is not actually as capable of handling some of these stacked box situations that you might be welcoming onto yourself with 12 and 13 personnel and maybe even 21 personnel, right? So, this becomes very fascinating. And you were leaning on the few bona fides that you can maybe give to Nick Caley, which is the fact that Sean McVay, somebody that we can actually believe his level of football intelligence, went and called Nick Caley in order to do the run game. This is going to have to be stellar, right? The run game is going to have to be stellar for anything to be successful in this offense, I believe.
I do like that you put the caveat on that stat, because that's kind of my issue with Warren Sharp, is he throws out a lot of stats that kind of I'm just a little bit confused by the context of that. I didn't know that, of all things to question about David Montgomery, would be his short yardage. It did feel like on, for you to add to your point, like on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, you bring him in and basically he's falling forward a yard or something like that. But if that is a concern, like the short yardage of David Montgomery, then that could be a big problem. I just think I'm with you, though. The context on that could be kind of hard to kind of measure
Just to clarify, Reggie, that was 3.9 yards per attempt in that situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Woody Marks finished the season with 3.6 yards per attempt in every scenario. So somehow, some way, that's an improvement. It's a career low for Montgomery, and it somehow, some way is an improvement over what they did last year. They had the second highest stuffed percentage in situations where you needed to gain 1 or 2 yards or the goal line last year. The only team that was worse than them was the Raiders. The Raiders went out there and overhauled their interior offensive line with the way that they operated this offseason. The Texans went about changing some things up on their interior offensive line as well. Wyatt Teller's going to be a starter if he's healthy, and then maybe they're going to have a brand new center, and maybe the center play, if it is Jake Andrews, is better because they might get a little bit better guard play. But I feel like the player, David Montgomery, is just a massive boost and a massive upgrade over what Nick Chubb was last year. And because we just laid out Woody Marks as the starter, he was miscast. He was not supposed to start. My fist pump when Woody Marks was drafted was because it felt like he was going to be a great complement to Joe Mixon. He was never supposed to go out there and be the lead back for this team. He was supposed to be a complement back to a guy that was already established as the first guy, and that feels like what he's set up to do here. You know, I went back and looked at just the miscast nature of Woody Marks. He had one game in college where he had less than 3 receptions his final year at USC. He had 3 games his rookie season where he got 3 targets or more for the Texans. It just goes to show you how much they didn't use him to his strength. And I feel like with the way that David Montgomery's brought in to be utilized, that will make Woody Marks better. Plus, if he gets a few less carries, maybe he's not visiting the blue tent every single game as well. So I think it's a combination of there's a lot left for David Montgomery comparatively to Nick Chubb, and there's a better use of Woody Marks. And that's, I feel like, what they're betting on from just the 2 running back standpoint, from the talent standpoint. It is, as Landry pointed out, it's better than what they've had. It's still not great in the grand scheme of things across the National Football League.
Yeah, and I wonder what it looks like. Like, do we see a situation where it's 1A and 1B with Montgomery and Woody Marks? Like, is it a true duo? I don't think it's necessarily the worst case scenario. Or do we see David Montgomery emerge as like the unquestioned lead back? I do think, despite the number that you put out there, I do think there's a little bit of upside in Woody Marks' game, and I think a lot of it is in the ability to catch the ball. But I think even running between the tackles, it felt like they were just running him into a brick wall a lot last year. It just felt like it was not probably suited for his game, although at times it felt like he was very capable of doing that when it was called upon. But I do think we could be looking at a true like running back duo. And I think it could actually be a pretty good one. I don't think you're going to get Joe Mixon in David Montgomery, but I think you can get closer to Mixon than what you added with Devin Singletary in 2023. And I'm encouraged by it. I do want to see how they block. And I think if Rutledge is the center, I think that adds upside. There might be some early growing pains, but I think the upside, it might be worth kind of taking it on the chin early for down the stretch. But I do think the run game is going to improve. It's just a matter of really how much and what exactly it looks like.
Yeah, the how much has been what I've been constantly sitting on, right? Because you were very, very much in the bottom third of the league, whether you're talking efficiency, raw numbers, what have you. How much of a jump is necessary to bring that? Like, I mean, sorry to jump the line, but we do have like the super chat over here that I think ties perfectly, right? Which is from Rich Boy Jay, who asks, is a decent or decent to good run game enough to get CJ Stroud where you want him to be? I feel like that's kind of what you need, at least in the system that you're setting up, right? You want to draw these guys down into the box to allow him to maybe have some of these opportunities deep over top. It's going to require defenses to view your run game as one that they actually have to take account of, because we've seen instances in the past where that's not really a concern, right? Where defenses don't have to actually concern themselves in order to stop anything.
Yeah, and the old the old adage of how to beat that cover 2 shell is just run it down their throats. The Texans have not been able to do that. We know how much CJ Stroud brings up that cover 2 shell defense. I did find one thing interesting about the Texans over the past few seasons, and I wrote about this for Houston Football, and it was just comparing the past 3 years, the top 10 rushers in the NFL. and just where their teams found them over the past 3 seasons, 20 of the 30 top 10 rushers over the past 3 years were first or second round picks. If you add in third round picks, which is first or second day selections, it was 24 of 30. Wow. And David Montgomery, a few years ago, was in the top 10. He was a third round pick. Devin Singletary was a third round pick. Joe Mixon, obviously, an investment in the first couple of days. Most teams that run the football well have made a early or significant investment in the running back, and some of those players are on their second team because they were traded for, Christian McCaffrey, or they were signed in free agency to one of the biggest running back contracts we've seen in recent memory, Saquon Barkley. So the investment in the running back position hasn't always been there. Ironically, the best performers have been former third-round pick Devin Singletary, former second-round pick Joe Mixon, and now you got Dave Montgomery, who at least is a former third-round pick. Most rushing attacks have somewhat of an investment and an early talent evaluation that the league agrees with, where those guys are drafted as well. So I found that interesting when I was comparing where the Texans have been, what they've tried to do. And it's worth noting Caserio's never drafted a running back on day 1 or day 2 in his tenure as general manager as well, which I thought was pretty intriguing. Maybe that'll change next year. Maybe it won't need to change because they'll figure it all out on the ground. I don't know that it's going to get to that level that we'd be like, don't draft a back. But
that'll never happen for me, brother. I'm drafting running back every year. That'll never happen for me.
I am fascinated to see if sort of the small bit of action that we have seen in minicamp and OTAs, as well as backing that action up at the podium from D'Amico Ryans, if they are indeed going to throw the football to David Montgomery and Woody Marks a whole lot more than they threw the football to the running backs in the past 2 seasons. I know that's 2 different offensive coordinators, but Nick Caley, to have been in New England, to have seen those various pass catchers come through and be effective pieces of the offense, and then to just not be able to gimmick or confound the way to throw the ball to Woody Marks when that's his calling card. I'm not advocating that he should have thrown the ball to Nick Chubb. He shouldn't have put Nick Chubb on the field.
He did.
But
he did throw the ball to Nick Chubb. I'm literally rewatching week 1, and I'm like, oh, they are throwing the ball to Nick Chubb.
Yeah, but I will be interested to see if that is something that's going to stick around, and if they've built the rest of this offense enough that they can continuously do that to a level that's effective.
Well, I also wonder if that's a CJ thing too. And I'm trying to be completely fair in this instance, because I go back and forth I had with Bobby Slowick about throwing the ball to Mixon, and that was in January. And Bobby Slowick's quote was, well, maybe we should do that. And I was like, okay. Part of me just said, okay, well, this is all Bobby's fault. But you fast forward to now, we're kind of saying the same thing, and it's a different OC and it's a different back. And I don't know if this is going through your progressions and getting the ball out of your hands and swinging it to him, because I know Woody Marks had a really big play when the one time that CJ Stroud did that. And maybe it's as much on the quarterback as it is the OC. And it goes back to our original question about the Caley Stroud dynamic, where maybe there's a little bit of a mix of like these offenses problems, whether it's getting the play in or getting it to the backs. Maybe there is a little bit of blame with the quarterback as well, because that's the only constant I can think of, unless we've just, maybe this has happened too, just gotten 2 OCs who didn't know what the hell they were doing and didn't know how to maximize their running backs, which is also a fairly valuable play on the betting card, if we're being honest.
It's all on the table. It could be the quarterback. It could be the 2 bumbling play callers. It could be a really bad combination of both.
But of all things to copy New England, like it felt like they knew how to get multiple running backs involved. Like it just felt like that was the thing. They could get guys involved in the pass game. And that was kind of when Caley first came here. That's kind of what I thought. If you're going to copy New England, okay, well, I mean, there was I always go back to the AFC Championship game. I mention this every time, but Sony Michel had 1,000 yards or 100 yards. Rex Burkhead had a couple touchdowns, and James White caught over a handful of passes. And I'm just like, okay, well, maybe they're going to use multiple backs, but
especially when your slot receiver was a nothing burger for most of the season too. Like you would think some of the short passing game would end up in the hands of the running backs. It did not. And that's one of the challenges that Nick Caley and company will have on offense. Speaking of the people that are supposed to be catching the ball, we'll talk about those receiving weapons here in just a moment. Right after we tell you a little bit about our friends over at SeatGeek. SeatGeek wants you to use the code Collective10 for 10% off tickets on SeatGeek. Maybe you're thinking about that big trip. Maybe you're going to a concert this summer. You can get your tickets at SeatGeek. If you're ready to watch the Texans this fall, but you're not sure exactly where you're sitting just yet, SeatGeek can take care of you. The #1 sports ticketing app is here for you. The Texans football, man, look at all these different options. Maybe you want to start with the two-step of the Bills and Bengals coming to town with MVP caliber quarterbacks. Maybe later in the year you want to go see the Texans play the Chargers, or you want to go watch them play the Commanders, or maybe, just maybe, you're thinking Christmas Eve would be huge. Let's go watch them play the Eagles in Philadelphia. They got everything for you at SeatGeek, even the game that I really want to go watch on the road. That's the Green Bay Packers. Look at all these great seats at the legendary Mecca that is Lambeau Field. SeatGeek has it all. Over 70,000 events, plays, and music shows, and just about any sport you can think of. And right now, Collective 10 is going to get you 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. It's 10% off any tickets with the promo code Collective 10. Just make sure you click the link in the description, download the app, have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thank you, SeatGeek, for 10% off when you use the code Collective 10. Collective 10 is the code. Download the app, enter the code. There's a link in the description down below. Visit with our friends at SeatGeek. Go see what you want to see with SeatGeek. Receiving weapons. We know what Nico Collins brings to the table for the 14 to 15 games that he's going to play over the course of the season. After him, well, you probably shouldn't throw Dalton Schultz the ball 100 times. You need more out of your second-year wide receivers. Let's talk about these receiving weapons. Where do we think the pass catchers are for this team? I think there's a really good amount of potential between what Nico Collins is relied upon to do, and then what we expect out of Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel in year 2 of their NFL careers. I think there's some pretty decent potential here for CJ Stroud, Nick Caley to operate with.
I think there's high upside with Higgins. And I don't think there's like a bust factor to him. I think you kind of have a good idea of what I think much like Woody Marks being asked to do, probably more than you wanted him to do in an ideal situation. I think the fact that Christian Kirk wasn't good kind of added to what you needed from Jaden Higgins. I actually thought he came through in some big moments for you, left a little bit of meat on the bone. After him, though, there is some upside, but there's also like a real low floor potentially with those guys. I like Jalen Noel. I like what we saw from him in minicamp in OTAs. And we know what Nico Collins is gonna be. We have a good idea of what he is. I think there's reason for optimism with the top 3 guys. After that, don't know. But I think this wide receiver room could be okay. But I think it rests on CJ Stroud and Jaden Higgins getting on the same page, which is something they've kind of struggled to do really in practice and in games as well, although there have been some good moments.
Yeah, I actually am glad that you got there because it's something I've been kind of pondering on. Like if there was a synergy score between receiver and quarterback, I wonder how this team would power rank, because it feels like Dalton Schultz might be #1 on that. And to your point, Cody, I don't know if you want that to be something that you lean on perpetually, right? Nico Collins clearly has a good rapport, but beyond that, your next guy is probably Tank. And I don't know that if we know what you're getting at him, talk less of how Higgins is. And honestly, we have not seen that progress particularly far just yet. Jalen Noel, he just didn't get very many reps in order to do that. And then, what else are we talking about there, including the likes of Foster Moreau, Cade Stover, who's even been here? Like some of these guys, I'm very curious to see what that rapport is, especially since, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to note that, the vibes, to, be kind of generic about it, the vibes on this offense seem like they're going to be very important as to how this thing goes. Like I'm very curious to see how they fall in with like the rapport of all of this, because as you mentioned, you're right. There's definitely dudes with some talent and upside, but the actualization of that is going to depend on 1, right, what the play design and calls look like, but 2, what their ability to execute that is. And that very much speaks to the dude who has to get them the football in CJ Stroud.
It felt like there's mass underutilization of Jalen Noel from last year. Christian Kirk was in his way. Hopefully that changes and Noel could showcase some of those things. I felt like he was the most consistent and even dynamic receiver as far as you could take it from OTAs and mini camps. He looks weirdly to say, a little bit faster. I didn't believe Jaden Higgins when he said that at the podium that, hey, Noel's faster. And then I saw one rep in camp and I was like, yep, I think actually I believe Jaden Higgins now. I think Noel is faster. Slot receivers have not had problems producing for that New England Patriots system in the past. Hopefully you can find a way to get the football consistently to Jalen Noel and Landry. And you've pointed it out probably more than anybody. Nolan Stroud actually looked like they had a couple of things going a couple of different times. And it was sort of that Noah Brown-esque, let's figure it out as the play goes along type thing. They had a couple of big plays. I think probably the one that sticks out the most is Seattle. They had a couple of big plays, but all that's, I mean, you need Noel or Higgins to bust out. Like, you need one of those guys to be good. You can't have another 100-target Dalton Schultz season. You're not going to be a very good offense. Unless Nico Collins is playing 17 and is a supernova every week. If Dalton Schultz is getting 100 targets, you're going to suck as a passing attack. You're not going to be good enough, and you're probably going to come up short in some really big moments where you need to put some points on the board. So that's where you turn to the second-year guys, because it's not going to be – look, Xavier Hutchinson looks like the best version of wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson, but he is what he is. He's a 400-yard guy that's going to get you a handful of touchdowns over the course of a season. You can't turn to him. He's a nice fill-in for a week or two if Nico's out, but you can't rely on him. You need Higgins or you need Noel, one of the two, to have a really nice season. Preferably Higgins, because he's that outside guy opposite Collins, and that feels like if he's good, it opens up a lot more for everything else in the middle of this offense.
And I think you can throw the Woody Marks discussion in here too. I think Woody Marks in the slot is – I think you could probably use that a little bit more too. We've talked about Lewis Bond and stuff, and how does he fit in? Woody Marks might be a better slot guy right now than Lewis Bond, and maybe that's something that you do. You get a little bit creative and throw him out there. We did see a little bit of that in mini camp OTAs. I think he's more than capable of doing that. So I actually think Montgomery can catch too. So maybe the running backs add another element when it comes to the receiving weapons too. But the Jaden Higgins thing, especially in the red zone, I think that's something that you need to really keep an eye on. I am fascinated by the Prize Picks number, which is it's typically a stock number where they have him at like less than 600 yards is like the number. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe they know something that I don't. They typically do. So that's kind of where they see Higgins. But I like the way Higgins plays. It did feel like, and I laid out the numbers last week, Mills was kind of forcing it to Higgins a few times. And if you just look at the raw numbers, it'll tell you, well, the production really wasn't like that much different on a per game basis. But I do also think Higgins kind of has that factor where the targets might not be high percentage a lot of times, but if you go to him in big moments, then I think I think that outweighs what the stock stats say. And I point to the Jags game where Mills went to him and he scored that touchdown, and they don't win the game without him. And I point to that Bills game at the end of the first half when it looked like it was going to be a disaster because Christian Kirk didn't get out of bounds, and then he finds Higgins in the end zone. So I think if CJ Stroud and Higgins can at the very least in the red zone develop like trust, where CJ Stroud maybe forces it to him a little bit more than he typically would, I think it would go a long way. And I don't think it's any coincidence that after those 3 games with Mills, we saw CJ Stroud going to Higgins more than he had with Nico Collins on the field. So I do think there's a little bit of an element where it's not going to be the most efficient thing, but maybe forcing it to Higgins is not the worst thing, especially in the red zone situations.
Yeah, probably not even the most fair expectation of this, but it would be kind of nice considering you look at the way that this receiving core, and not just the wide receivers, tight ends included, and wide running backs, as you guys mentioned, there's kind of a nice diversity of talents. It would be nice if this became something to the effect where Nico Collins is going to be Nico, and then you have various different, stars for the particular game, right? You have a Nico Collins, well, in the Nico Collins games, you're going to be clear, but you have a Jalen Noel game. You have your Higgins games within here, right? God bless us all if you have a Marlon Klein game in there, because he does present like the type of like skill to be able to, do some things like that. Whether he's actually on the field to be able to apply his trade, I don't know. But like, you have the skill sets to be able to do various interesting things that I imagine would be good at attacking various different defenses. Again, it comes back to the top line item that we were talking about. How does CJ Stroud execute, and is Caley capable of like drawing it up in such a way where you can get to it?
I'm so disappointed in you. I cannot believe
Foster Moreau.
As much as you backed that guy all offseason, you didn't drop in a Foster Moreau game.
Look, man, you know me. I could be silly. I'm not going to be ridiculous.
I thought for sure you're going to
the
drop
Foster Moreau 90 yards of receptions game. I don't know if it's coming. Like, I think Foster Moreau is just going to be the constant. He got you like 30, 40 yards that you really, really needed.
Damn it, there was a Darren Fells game back in the day. There was a Jordan Akins game back in the day.
It was a Jordan Akins game.
There could be a Foster
Jordan Akins games. There was an O.J. Howard game.
There was an O.J. Howard game. If you could have those games, you could have a Foster Moreau game. Damn it.
Oddly enough, this is the one that's hard to get me to. I don't know. I'm a weird person. I apologize.
There you go. All right, so that's the state of the receiving weapons. I like Reggie's idea that it's Nico Collins and then, hey, take turns after that, but it's not going to hurt my feelings if all of a sudden Jaden Higgins shows up as a big-time year 2 wide receiver. Not a lot of buzz for any of the year 2 wide receivers that were drafted on day 2 in last year's draft, with the exception of Luther Burden up there in Chicago, because they traded a guy away to get Luther a few more opportunities. So Higgins is in a group with a bunch of other guys that don't have a lot of buzz. We'll see if he can create some in training camp. Let's talk about the big fellas, the big uglies. I affectionately named them.
Creative, Cody.
Okay. Thanks.
I was gonna let you walk. I was gonna let you live on that one.
I didn't come up with it. I just like to call them the big uglies. Okay.
Right.
I didn't create it.
Mm-hmm.
They got to be better. And there may only be one new face. There probably at some point needs to be 2 new faces. And hopefully you don't have to find out what Evan Brown and Famechi Wiwu and some of these other guys bring to the table, because you can have a pretty close to starting lineup week in and week out. What do you make of the situation that they've put themselves in with the offensive line? Big bet on Ed Ingram, big bet on Wyatt Teller, and they got 2 options over there at right tackle. Oh, and by the way, they spent a first-round pick on a guy that doesn't play center, and they're trying to make him play center.
I actually want to give CJ Stroud credit, because I think he did do a good job last year of kind of masking the offensive line. So, you know, we talk a lot about the stuff that CJ Stroud didn't do and stuff. I do want to say that last year he did a really good job of, I think, at times making the offensive line look better, specifically before the playoffs. So I will say that the upside on this offensive line, I think it's kind of limited. I think your only upside is really Ariante Ursary. Continues to do what he does. And then if Rutledge wins the center battle, then maybe you have some upside there. I don't know what to really expect from Ed Ingram. I don't expect a lot more. Maybe I'm a little bit low on him. And then Wyatt Teller, maybe if he can get somewhere between what we've seen the last 2 years and what we saw the previous 4, then you'll be good. There always is an element, though, when we talk about this where we say, okay, well, it's better than last year, which I think we can probably get around to that. But as far as the offensive line, I think if they are able to run the ball like they want to, then that could be nice. But my one question would be, does it come at the sake of pass blocking, which is something that they were really, really emphasizing before. So sometimes, like, if you go from one extreme to the next, you end up finding yourself in trouble, especially in football. I use like the Dallas Cowboys analogy of, okay, Bill Parcells is too much of a hard ass for you, so you're going to bring in Wade Phillips. Well, then you develop, then it's kind of like it's nowhere in between. So I do wonder, are they going to be able to still maintain a certain level of pass blocking with this clear emphasis on run blocking?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've gotten to a point where I'm in this weird dilemma of centers, which is I would love if Keelan Rutledge can get in there and play center, because they have stated that their goal is to run the football, and having that big physical son of a gun feels like it gives you the best opportunity to open up Grand Canyon size holes to give David Montgomery an opportunity to really, break through, or let Woody Marks hit a hole really fast. The question I have is, how capable is Keelan Rutledge, or the pairing of Keelan Rutledge and CJ Stroud, of adequately setting protections? Because that was a big issue that popped up, especially early last year. Got better as the season went along, but I don't think that I would call it particularly good per se. And that gets to be a really scary proposition, because I think that you can win if you just defense and run the football. I don't want to go through the season of trying to figure that one out, though. You know what I mean? I feel like you need to be able to pass protect better, because also, are we going to get a good feeling on CJ Stroud if you can't pass protect, right? I know that's not the stated goal. The stated goal of the season is win a Super Bowl, point blank, period. However, the subtext or like the subheader is, let's get a feeling of whether CJ Stroud is worth this $50-60 million contract. And you get to a really bad place if he is once again in year 4 of this running for his life in order to try and make things happen, right? Like that is a very bad place to be, except I think your best circumstance for doing that is putting Jake Andrews back out here. And it feels like he's lighting the ass. You know, like I think that there's a real kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation that's brewing right here. And I'm a little uncomfortable with thinking about it.
Oh, by the way, if you're talking about an unsettled interior offensive line, or you're worried about the pass blocking nature of that interior offensive line, you only have, 5 of the toughest defensive tackles that you're going to face to start the season. Ed Oliver with Buffalo, Dexter Lawrence with Cincinnati, DeForest Buckner with Indianapolis, Quinnen Williams with Dallas, and then a terrifying duo of Jeffrey Simmons and John Franklin Myers there in Tennessee. You better figure it out fast, and you better be able to stop those guys in the run game, because that was your stated goal this offseason, and you better be able to protect CJ Stroud, because that's one hell of a start for this interior offensive line to go up against those defensive tackles to begin the season. That's probably the roughest 5-game stretch by a wide margin that those 3 interior guys, whoever it may be, are going to face.
Yes, and I think the right tackle battle is also intriguing. We talk about the center, the right tackle with Trent Brown and Braden Smith. I don't think I've been as low on assigning. Cody's starting to give me a hard time for it, as I am on Braden Smith. Like I just don't. I don't know. But I was kind of low on Trent Brown last year, and Trent Brown was fantastic. So maybe the stupidity at right tackle continues for your boy. Who knows? But I just feel like I feel like Trent Brown is the right tackle. I feel like he's going to win the job, and then I don't know what's going to happen with Braden Smith. I will say this might be a long shot. If you do get beginning to end Trent Brown at right tackle, I think that completely changes the dynamic. I just don't think anyone's really like betting on that. But if you get what you got from Trent Brown in that small sample size last year, not too small, then I think that it could be an interesting element for the offense. I just don't know.
It definitely could. The question I have, which again is not one that I should be concerned about right this moment, is then what do you do with a future? Because I don't know that you can bet on that happening twice.
For
right?
Sure.
Like, you know what I mean? If that's like, hey, he held down our right.
Yeah.
So that is the scary part. But that's a future problem that I'd be okay having.
Here's what happens: they go from up to $4 million to this year it's up to $8 million, and then they overdo it and they give Trent Brown up to 16, and it's like now we're just getting carried away. They just keep doubling the potential max value of the contract.
Yeah, but I feel better about the right tackle competition. Like I understand where you're at, and I don't think you're wrong. I just feel like both of them can do the job, and ultimately that's not what I'm worried about. The thing that I'm scared about is those guys being put in circumstances where they're, there's a cornerback blitz coming off the edge, and we did not adequately protect because whoever is identifying that on the inside was not able to. Physically, I think they can do the job to some degree. I know that Trent ain't like the most agile or mobile or whatever, but he can do the job if he is put in the place to succeed. The question that is happening all over for me on this offense is everybody going to be put in the places to succeed at various different levels?
They've claimed, D'Amico Ryans has, the communication's fantastic with the offensive line, but Braden Smith hasn't been out there yet for any real
He's
things.
not a part of the offensive line then.
Oh, that's a good point. It's nice that their biggest offensive line investment's not on the field at all. It may not be on the field at all.
That's a great point. We have not talked very much about that.
I do wonder if at the end of all of this, or actually week 6, we're just sitting there and we're saying, why didn't they just sign a center? Like if they wanted a different center, why didn't they just sign a center? I wonder if that's where we're going to land early on. If Rutledge can't beat out Andrews, or if he does and there's too much of a growing pain and it affects things. Like, I do wonder if maybe some of the money that they spent is good.
Or draft a center.
Or draft a center.
Yeah, day 3 maybe.
Draft a center, I'd be a little more inclined on. I think the reason why they don't, sign a center is pretty clear: $27 million. Right? The other guys, I have a strong feeling that we'll be able to look around the league and be like, not really worth that one. Not really worth that one. Because again, this center class got played up just because people needed them. We were talking about Cade Myers like this was something that you needed to do. You know what I mean? Like I don't know that the grocery store was Cade Mays. My bad. But you get the point, right? The disrespect was not intended, but it makes my point for me.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you know what? There's a lot of those veterans that change teams that are probably better than Jake Andrews in people's eyes. And they've played the position unlike Keelan Rutledge. So
yeah,
there you go. Maybe Evan Brown's the solution. We didn't talk about him. Depth piece for this team.
What a fun time that would be.
Hopefully we never talk about him. You don't need him if you get healthy play from the other guys. Okay. That's the end of the Big Ugly conversation. Or as someone in the chat requested them be called the Big Sexies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shout out to Kevin Nash.
Which is hilarious because you went from an offensive line where they probably would like being called big sexies to an offensive line where they are completely okay with Big Ugly.
Well, you ruined it for me, Reggie. If Tunsil liked it, I don't want it. So back to the Big Uglies. Back to the Big Uglies. Reggie, you got the folks on the radio. Tell them where they can find you.
10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the loop on Sports Radio 610. And of course, every Monday right here, 6 p.m.
Yeah, the locker room with Landry Locker each and every weeknight, 10:30. He's also half of SNL, which you see each and every weekday at 4 p.m.
75%.
He's 75%. Who cares of SNL?
I'm just kidding. 49.
Nope. You said it. You said take it as it's your first answer. You can't. You didn't erase it enough on the Scantron. That registered as your first answer.
When's the next Spanky's counseling session then?
Yeah,
next Friday.
17th. The
Okay,
17th,
excellent.
the final off-season Spankies, and then we will have training camp shortly thereafter that, as we're still waiting for the official announcements of the training camp dates, which is curious.
Maybe they won't have one. Who knows?
There you go. All right. Well, it's a pessimistic way to look at the world.
We're ready to go.
All right. There we go. There it is. The Texans Collective each and every week, or each and every Monday at 6 o'clock right here on YouTube. Like, subscribe, visit our friends at Prize Picks and SeatGeek. And Sean Pendergast is in here, but he would tell me to go ahead and end stream.